Vicky Linnane and welcome to Embrace Therapy podcast. I am a practicing art therapist based in Ireland. In each episode, I will interview guests from various fields of therapy and well-being with the aim to encourage healing through embracing therapy.
On the podcast this week is Rowena Keaveny. She's a professionally qualified art therapist based in Offaly, Ireland, and she also works online with clients across the world. She is a certified cyber therapist. She draws on diverse ranges of theoretical models in order to address and meet each client's individual needs. Rowena is also the new co-editor of the IACAT journal online, which is called Polyphony. Polyphony offers an important resource for getting to know each other's work and contributing to a strong community of arts therapists in Ireland, as well as presenting our work to creative arts therapists in other countries. If you haven't already, make sure you check out Polyphony. The website is polyphony.iacat.ie. That's polyphony.iacat.ie. I really hope that you enjoyed today's podcast episode with Rowena. So Rowena, it's absolutely gorgeous to have you. This is like our take two, which is gorgeous because I feel like, we've got a rehearsal in. But Rowena, you're an art therapist. You're based in Ireland, and during the last few months, you've become the co-editor for the journal Polyphony. So there's a lot going on.
There is. There's a lot to get your head around.
Yeah, lots of plates spinning. But how are you finding getting into that role? And congratulations for accepting it, because no better woman, in my opinion.
Oh, thank you so much, Vicky. That's really kind.
Yeah, of course.
I think I'm starting to settle in. Mikey's been brilliant.
Yeah.
And then the whole transition of the journal being from paper-based to online. It's just been incredible, I think, in terms of accessibility and inclusivity for creative arts therapists in Ireland and beyond.
I love a book, like I really do. I love the texture and turning the pages. However, I'm actually finding that I'm going on to the website a lot more than I would have picked up the journal. Yeah. Even though I love the journal, the physicality. Yeah. But I'm actually just like, I have it as one of my top hits. So like, I'm constantly in there checking out what's going on.
There's one new article went up last week, and there's another one due in the next few days.
It's gorgeous. Like it's like a piece of art in itself,
It is. And I think the beauty of it now as well is that once you're there's opportunities to see many more things. Poetry, galleries, films, animation, as well as the backbone, the articles, the research, grounded in evidence.
I really appreciate that as well, like, because, well, for people that are listening, maybe they might be creative arts therapists themselves. And, when we come into this work, we often, like for me, I've found that I don't do as much art, but I do a lot more dancing. I'm, and I'm acting more and doing a lot of drama and things like that, because I feel like the art has become more like work, which is, such a shame. But hopefully I'll get back to that. But I think Polyphony and the website is like, it's so diverse in that way because it has all modalities there. And even poetry, like, I just love that. It's great. You can go in and feel like you can contribute, Yeah,
and combinations of modalities as well.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting to see. And I could imagine there'd be more crossover and interaction in Polyphony in relation to that.
Yeah, hopefully. That would be gorgeous. Like collaborations between dance movement therapists and music therapists. I could see that being just gorgeous. Yeah. And for you at the moment then, alongside this, you're working as an art therapist. And how is that going at the moment? Like, what is that looking like? Is it more online, or are you in person again? So how is that for you right now?
I'd say it's a hybrid at the moment. I work for Autism Initiatives, and I'm back there 1 day a week in their Dublin centre. I was in their telecentre as well, but that fell by the wayside over the 2 years.
Yeah.
And then private practice, is a mixture of seeing people in person and online as well. Yeah, and I think for me it'd be really important to keep the parallel.
Yeah.
And to have that option as well.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people have, like, we were saying just before as well that, some people are going to keep up working online, and some people have decided to completely let it go. And then, like you're saying that, like, I'm going to keep with the hybrid approach. And it's kind of keeping your clients in mind as well, that it's a little bit easier. They don't have to travel as well. And
yeah, and I think because I work a lot with people with intellectual disabilities, it is, for some, it actually suits them better. They engage for longer. They seem to get more from it because they're not as intimidated. The screen kind of gives a distance or a safety.
wow.
Sometimes.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Because I found that although I've gone back in person 1 day a week, when we have had to be online, I find that people, they engage for longer and better. And also I think there's a confusion between the crossover. So when you're in person now, somebody might not be sure how to look at you or where to look at you. Whereas online, it's in a very confined, directed space. So that's really interesting to see how that evolves.
That's actually blowing my mind a little bit, because when I think about it, when we're sitting with somebody, a body physically beside us, it can be quite intimidating to know where to look.
Yes.
But obviously, yeah, like you're saying, the screen is that focal point. It is the place where you focus. Because you have to talk to it, otherwise you won't be heard.
Yes.
Number one. Yeah. And then I suppose it is, like you said, that distance. I hadn't really thought about it like that before.
And I think because if it's a healthcare setting, you asks, people can only see your eyes, and that's very hard if you have trouble interpreting facial expressions or, being with other humans in general. If you can't see 2/3 of their face, whereas online you still can. So I think that's part of it too.
And when you're seeing people online, is it usually their own devices, or is it the place where they are? Like, do they give them some device? How is that?
Well, that's been really interesting, because before, in a lot of centres, everything was done for the people who attend the centre. But because there was no one to step in, most people set the tech up themselves or came online themselves, and have continued to do that, even though they're back in the centre. If I see them online, very often they can navigate that themselves. So I think that's really interesting as well.
Yeah, very empowering. Ownership over their process as well. Yeah.
Autonomy.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. And then the devices that they use, can that be random? Like, can it be like 1 week they're coming in on their phone, or 1 week they're coming in on the iPad or the laptop? Is it inconsistent in that way, or?
No, it's tended to be really consistent. I don't know, this is the nature of the group. They tend to have their own tablets or iPads. It's very rarely a phone, only if something goes awry.
Yes.
But yeah, if they're in the centre, it would be the centre laptops mainly.
Yeah, that's good. Because
and in the beginning, the internet was appalling. So that's had to improve as time has gone on.
Yes,
they could only be in one particular room in the building, because that was the only place where the signal worked, and even near the window.
Of course, I'm very familiar with that, having to put my hand up and find an extra bar.
Nobody
yeah. But it is interesting when we think about the devices as well, because obviously when we're thinking about coming from a therapeutic perspective, and then keeping boundaries and then that confidentiality factor as well, we have to think about all these things. But if you're coming in on their phone, does that change it slightly? Because I don't know, like, it's it's more likely that they could get an interference of like a text message, or they could get a phone call coming in. Like it's like it's for me, it would be kind of like someone standing outside the door, the session room
Yeah.
door. Do you know that
Yeah.
sense with a smartphone, let's say? But what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm really interested at the moment around the role of the smartphone in a therapeutic context.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm really interested in what people do with them in the session, if they use them at all. Or I think some groups of people are so used to being on them all the time
Yes.
that it's not unnatural to them to receive or send a message. Or and a lot of the people I work with, they show me photographs they've taken during the week. So at the end of the session, when they've made their images, they'll show me, that they went somewhere with somebody or something that was really important to them through the week. And during the lockdown as well, the session started slightly, probably 10 minutes earlier, because they would send me a message on Skype, and I'd know exactly how they were because of that message, and it made it easier for them to transition into the session.
Yes.
Rather than get stuck because processing the sentence in the language they wanted to say was really difficult and challenging.
Right.
That they'd done that part before, it's still part of the session, but just in a very different way. So navigating that and trusting that and keeping it bounded and safe, and was a really interesting developmental process, I think, for the therapeutic work with them.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm thinking about how to make a parallel in my work. When let's say a little one comes in and they've had a particularly busy sensory day maybe, and they're a bit overloaded, they might come in and just go for the slime straight away, or they might just go for the sand and make a big mess, and it kind of feels like that discharge. So I wonder, is that the same kind of thing, but they're like putting words on it and kind of throwing it in to the pit almost, or something? It's kind of like a kind of a safe discharge for them, I suppose, that they can kind of go, now that's done, kind of thing.
And you could tell as well by the length of the message.
Yeah.
How they would be when they arrived on the screen into the session.
Yeah.
And I think as well, that's another part of the navigating and being back in person, because it can be confusing now that part has stopped.
Yes.
And I still do get messages from some of the people I work with. So it's navigating that. How does that work for them now? It's not in the same way.
It's fascinating. Gosh.
Yeah.
Because it seemed to be very helpful. So how do we then transition that? Like, how do you keep that component? That's a tricky one. Yeah.
I know it was like been the bank holiday for St. Patrick's Day on Thursday. Because the building's going to be closed, one of my clients just said to me, Skype instead. It just became like, well, if she's not here, she must be there. Online. So it's just how it's seeped into the consciousness.
That's incredible. Yeah. And that means that they're putting value on that experience as well, doesn't it? Like, it's really clear. And a lot of us would have been a lot, like, I can even say for a moment I was quite pessimistic. It did show a lot of benefits with especially adults. I found online was great. Teenagers, not so much. I think just because they have a different relationship maybe to it. I'm not sure, but then children, like really young ones, like even 6-year-olds, like I found that it was great for them because they could show me around their house, show me all their teddies. And it seems so important to them to introduce me to their world,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think there's a richness in that too.
I think so.
Yeah, that it doesn't exist in isolation.
But then it means as well, like when we transition from being online then into the room, I could kind of bring in a bit of their world because I've seen it now. be like, oh, remember that huge caterpillar that you had that was wrapping around you one day?
Yeah.
How can we make something like that for you here?
Yeah.
Things like that. So it almost becomes like a transitional memory or something.
Yes. Yeah.
It's really nice. So yeah, there's a bit of a process of some people letting it go,
Yeah.
and then clients having to let that go and decide if they're okay with that. Do they need to find another therapist that's working online, or there's a lot of that as well, isn't there?
Well, it's just become a tool to be used alongside traditional ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd love to see, like, statistically in a couple of years, who's still using online and who isn't.
Yeah, that would be very good to know.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But of course, like, you have had a wealth of experience of digital art being used in the art therapy room even before COVID came. So in a way, it's not, I suppose, too unusual to have devices or computers in the room with you, or a camera or something,
It wouldn't be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you find that was helpful to have that experience with it before? Or I'd love to know a little bit more about that, how you found it.
Yeah, I think it was because I was so used to having the tech side there anyway. In many ways, it would have been my ideal when I was training, that this was a possibility, because it wasn't then, but it would have definitely appealed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what would be your favorite then to use in the room? Like, let's say, like, what would be on the desk? What would be there for a client to come in and use? What would be laid out in front of them?
Well, there'd be all the traditional paint, pencils, pencil crayons, but there'd also be camera, tablet, laptop, tripod. Yeah, but it's just set up in such a way that it is part of what's on offer. It's not directing you one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Just if that's what will work for you the best, then it's the options there, rather than because it could delay as well if you say, well, I have that but I don't have it with me.
Yeah.
The fact that you have it there, good to go and fully charged, I think it supports the process, having it.
Absolutely. And when you talk about digital art, then what kind of way do people use it? So let's pick one in particular. Let's pick the iPad, let's say, or let's pick that one first. So typically, how would someone use that in an art therapy session?
Yeah, well, I'd have the tablet and iPads loaded with different apps. So they could be sensory ones. Is a really good one, that if you put your finger on the screen, the heat of the finger attracts lots of different sparks and things, and you can swirl them around. But if you're somebody who's nervous or not sure what to expect, it's a really good icebreaker for them, just because they get so excited by the fact the heat from their finger can generate all this imagery. It's just fantastic.
That's gorgeous. Yeah. And what would be the main app that would be used then?
I just make sure I have a variety. There's animation ones, drawing ones, more sensory based ones, social skills ones as well. It's a really good one called Klug, for younger people with autism. So it goes through different scenarios, like being bullied, or there's all these aliens and they have to help them get home back to Klug. But
oh my gosh, I have never heard of that. That's amazing.
Yeah, and it's narrated by people with autism as well. So it's really identifying.
Yeah. That's very magic. That
it's developed in Cork, I think.
Oh my gosh, brilliant.
Yeah. So somebody I worked with, they do that for first 5-10 minutes of the session, and then they transition into more traditional making.
And have you ever thought about using something like Minecraft?
Yes, yeah, but I would definitely need to upskill on my old Minecraft.
Yeah, I just think is it a girl, Elsie or Elsa. Oh, I wish I could remember her name now, but I'll put it in the notes of this interview. But there's someone that is teaching,
Yes.
Minecraft as,
Yeah.
and I just think it's incredible because the way she described it is that Minecraft is like a sandbox, sand
Yeah.
tray, and it is just that moving picture, and you can build. And this whole idea that like she builds an island, which is the therapy room, and I just love that. I think that's
Yeah.
fantastic. And I can definitely see a lot of my clients would absolutely adore that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and there's a lot of research, isn't there, into gaming at the
yeah.
moment. There's a really good game, I can't think of the name of it, that was developed with people who experience schizophrenia.
Wow.
So in terms of hallucinations, visual and auditory, the game was built therapeutically
Oh
with
wow.
people that was their experience. So that was fascinating as well.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
Yeah. Wow.
yeah. Yeah,
Like,
and as you navigate the game, you're navigating the experience of living with schizophrenia.
that is unreal. That's fantastic that that is happening because for those who maybe helped develop it as well, I can only imagine what that was like for
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
So healing, I'd imagine. Great, my goodness. Yeah, so I suppose for me, like, my knowledge and use of an iPad is bare minimum. Do you know? Guilty. Like, I
Uh,
I know about Procreate, but that is literally it. Like,
mhm.
yeah, I wouldn't have a clue where to start. So it's not one that I have offered, but I really want to, like you said,
Yeah.
like just I need to upskill. And for anyone who's listening who is a therapist, even like a talk therapist or a social worker,
Mm.
would you recommend that this be something that they have, if they're
Definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, because I think the more routes and avenues we have to support the people we work with, the
Mm-hmm.
better, and hopefully as trainings develop and tech develops, that the two will be integrated so it's not such a shock to the system when you've
Mm-hmm.
completed your training. That it doesn't have to be either or. It is that constant search for what will support somebody the best,
Yes,
to find their own authentic voice.
absolutely.
Mm.
Um, and would you have any experience of a time where you have seen it fail, as in they've tried and it's just been not good for them?
Goodness, I need to think about that. Um, I don't think I have because
Mm,
it's such a part of the process. You really discover with a person whether it is for them or not.
yeah, yeah.
So I think together that decision's made naturally as part of the therapeutic process.
Mm.
But I will think hard about that now.
Well, fail was probably the wrong word to
Yeah,
use, but like that feeling of like someone giving it a good go and realizing, oh, I'm not gonna use that one again, like kind of thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, so that's really interesting. Um, and I suppose, would you see it as like, would more opportunities happen then, like because you get to, in certain apps, I'm sure it kind of step into it and get to make it more of a movie, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. And I think there's so many programs and things that you can adapt for therapeutic purposes.
Mm,
There's one I was using around storyboards,
yeah.
but you can animate them as well, so they can be stills, as in the fixed storyboard at the end. But in the process, somebody there was one I was using, they could decide what they look like, so did they want it to match what they physically look like, or
Yeah.
did they want it to be something or some different time?
Mm-hmm.
But there was complete choice and autonomy
Mm-hmm.
about what they did in it and how it worked really for them, depending on what the issue was they were exploring.
I could see it really working well as well with the internal family systems model
Hmm.
with like building avatars for each part or something.
Yes. Yeah.
That would
Yeah.
be quite interesting, you
Yeah. Because
know.
the one I'm thinking of, there was a real issue around time management in the morning and getting physically out of the door.
Mm.
So we had the whole process of when they get up, going to have a wash, going downstairs for breakfast, getting into the car and heading off to college with mum. But as they could see how the whole process worked, and
Yeah.
it was them, deciding how long they wanted to clean the teeth for, but still with the goal in mind that they had to be out of the door.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And then when you're working online, um, do you find that those apps can be used as well, or is it very much they do art in their
Yeah.
place and you're observing and witnessing? How does it work online then?
Yeah, the storyboard one was online,
Oh,
so
great.
they could see everything on screen, and then it's collaborative
Oh, wow.
practice as well, because if you've got the controls your end, then they can tell you exactly what they want you to do or where. So it is very much collaborative process as well.
Oh gosh, that's incredible. Yeah. Yeah, just opening my mind now. It's like,
I know
like
it sounds a bit bonkers at times, but
yeah.
because it's so grounded in the therapeutic process
Yes.
and that the ethics of it, because I think that can be what throws a lot of people off working digitally.
Mm-hmm.
But if you adhere to the same ethical guidelines, then
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
there is less room for
Mm.
error.
And then I'm thinking as well, like, would there be a lot of transference then? Because if you're moving for them in some of
Mm.
that, can you feel that? Like, I'd imagine that being really visceral and a lot of connection in that moment of
Mm.
maybe moving and making for them if they
Yeah.
wish.
Yeah, it just seems to be. I think it comes back to the having navigated through that with them.
Yeah.
So it just becomes a different element of the relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fascinating.
Yeah, I think the issue more comes if the internet freezes or, there's an issue that way because you can be somewhere really important and
Yes. Yeah, of
to have that
course.
interrupted can be quite shocking.
Yeah. Have you ever had an experience where somebody isn't in the place where you thought they were? Like, has that ever happened? I know that that was something that kind of came up in a lot of colleagues of mine, that they would have been, planning on seeing somebody and we would agree a time and a place for this session to be, but they turn on their screen and they're not actually where they said they'd be. Has that ever
Yeah.
happened to you?
I think it might have done a couple of times if they're cared for by somebody else
Oh, yes.
and for, whatever reason they've had to be in a different house
Yeah.
but not nothing too serious anyway.
Yeah. Because that's the hard bit as well, is that holding, isn't it? And a lot of
Yeah.
trust. But that's part of any therapeutic relationship, really, is that
Yeah.
trust. Yeah. So there's just that extra possibility of not actually being where the agreed place would be, that can happen.
Yeah, I'd be more concerned about their autonomy around their own confidentiality.
Yes.
Is a parent listening
Mm-hmm.
or, do they live in a busy house with lots of people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
So
yeah.
having a good headset,
Yes. Yeah.
earphones is quite important as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So besides then you have the camera there. And how do you find the photography aspect of art therapy? How does that work for you?
Yeah. I think it's fascinating because it has so much potential for alteration and change. A photo isn't just what it appeared to be when you first take it. It can be altered and changed in so many different ways, which can represent transformation and integration.
Yeah.
So even the different processes somebody can make with a single image really shows that, their development.
Mm. And like you were saying as well, them coming to you and showing the photos that they've taken during the week.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like a continuation.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And it's like you were saying that, when children showed you things important to them, it's the same way, it's just done externally,
Mm-hmm.
so a trip to the zoo, or,
Mm.
somewhere they went with a parent they don't see very often, those things are really, really significant and important.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then there's that idea, like you said, you can kind of work with the image then to change it in some way. You can add to it, take away, change it, blur it, all those kind of manipulation tools that we have.
Make collages.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And with it then, do you ever find that people want to print it out then and use the actual hard copy photos and work in that way?
Very rarely, actually.
Yeah.
Which is interesting as well, I think.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. The images, they can be imported to form the foundation of a film or, a moving piece, but actually physically printing off, not very often.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's just such an area that I haven't really delved into, and I'm kind of sitting here with you now going, why? What has been the block? Why haven't I done this? I have a few clients that would be very interested in using a camera. For your camera then, would you have one that has its own memory stick, and then you how do you work that side of things? Very practical question, but like
it could be a USB, or it could be an external hard drive, password protected.
Password protected. Yeah, that's great.
It's almost like it becomes an extension folder, but it's a digital folder. So same principles.
A little bit lighter.
Yeah, very much so. Not as much space.
That's really a lovely element to it as well. That's so practical because we're holding on to a lot of physical work. It can build up. So in that way, it doesn't have that limitation. It can be quite a positive thing in that way as well. So there's lots of positives really to it. Yeah, it's gorgeous.
As long as they don't go near water.
Yes, exactly. Oh yes, another good point to make.
Yeah, kind of aware of that alongside the traditional materials.
Yes. And yeah, like I was thinking as well about like some therapists, they like to use like assessment tools and have an assessment period and things like that. Do you do that? Do you I know you mentioned an app there that was really specific, and maybe there are apps that you use in that way, like an assessment tool. What do you think about that area?
It's really interesting because across the 2 years there have been a lot more suddenly appearing. But I haven't really used them too many that way. Kind of old school on them.
Yes, yeah.
Assessment front.
Same, yeah. But I was just fascinated to see because I know that there's a few apps that are in development stage, and it's very much an assessment tool app. So I know that there are some out there, and there's some being made now, which I think has its good points and its bad points, and it's just where we all decide what fits us. Like you've been saying as well, it's everyone's different in that way.
And I think technology, people have such emotional reactions to it.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think that's just another element in which some people go, yay, and other people go, no.
Yes, that's exactly it. Yeah. And then of course, like working online, a few of us have decided to stop working online, or if we were to continue, I know that it's been recommended and suggested to us that we do some training in the area. And
Yeah.
I know that you've done training. Do you want to say a little bit about that and what that's been like for you?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I did the certified cyber therapist course
Yeah.
that was done through the Online Therapy Institute.
Yeah.
So I think it was 120 hours altogether.
It's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
On top of everything else.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting because as I was developing an online practice, it really made me question why, you know, and to be really aware of the ethics
Absolutely.
as well.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
and I
Even
noticed.
down like to um, the disinhibition effect.
Mm,
Just to be really aware that people do very different things online than they would in a therapeutic room with you.
yeah. Yeah. A lot of people coming in their pajamas, this kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, just thinking about it differently because they're at home and
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of that. Um, yeah. And besides that, then, you've got your work in Dublin,
Mhm.
and your private practice in Offaly, is that right?
Yep, here in Bath.
Yeah. Yeah. And how long have you had that private practice in Offaly?
Um, I've been trying to sort of work it up since I graduated, but then it's very hard to find spaces.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think that kind of forced me into it then as well. But especially with everything closed and
Yeah. That's another good point though, isn't it? That you don't need to rent a space.
yes,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah,
Yeah. That's it.
yeah.
And have you done groups online yet?
I have done for different organisations,
Hmm.
like very or themed or fixed amount of time. So a lot of 6-week programs,
Hmm.
which was fascinating too.
Yeah. And how many people roughly would be a group for you?
On those occasions, it was between 6 and 8.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
Yeah, so it wasn't too many.
Yeah. Not loads of little boxes on a screen.
No,
Like.
no, goodness me, my eyesight's bad enough. I wouldn't have been able to see them.
Oh, that's it again. It's like, you have to have those restrictions and limitations, and
Yes.
yeah, it's all part of that boundary. Um, and the time frame, that's very important. Yeah,
Mm.
it's really lovely. Did you find yourself being a little bit more direct in those kind of groups, or?
In the beginning, I did, I
Mm,
think, which was really interesting too. And I think you're aware of how you speak more,
yeah.
how quiet or loud your voice is. Yeah. Or even different accents, because they could be, or the way you use language, even.
Yes.
That came up a lot for me.
Yeah.
Because I have,
Yeah. It is. It
different
is that.
phrases or sayings that mean,
Mm. Mm.
well, they don't mean anything to anyone else. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, no, I get that completely. Um, yeah, and for anyone who is, starting out now as a creative arts therapist, let's say, because that's what we are, so I suppose it's easier to talk about that.
Yeah.
Um, they're like just coming to the end of their training.
Mhm.
Would you have anything to say to them about the online world and working, and any pros and cons or advice or anything, thinking about yourself when you finished up, like,
I think the primary one would be not to be scared of it.
hmm
I always come back to it doesn't have to be either or.
yeah.
It can be both. And it will be, of course, about what suits the client you're working with best. And I think as the digital world expands, I don't
Mm.
think there's the option to refuse to have anything to do with it because it's what our clients will bring.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so to be informed and knowledgeable
Mm.
and be open to it, I think.
And would there be anything? I know this is a hard question now because I'm going to ask you to try and think of a resource, but would there be anything that you could say would be helpful to pick up and read before jumping on Do you know, does anything come to mind? And I can put it in the notes, like any book or article or anything that comes to mind about that.
Yeah, there's a good the Association for Online Counselling and Therapy, based in the UK. I'm a member of that professional body once I did the certified psychotherapist course, and they have a lot of interesting resources on there as well.
Lovely. I actually think I wrote that down. ACTO
Yes,
dash
ACTO. Yeah.
-org.uk. I think that's it. Yeah. So that's a good one to go to. Brilliant.
And in terms of articles and up-to-date articles, just good old Google search for digital art therapy. It kind of gives you the transition of what, because I think the first articles were kind of 2007, and there weren't very many. It was more about why people either shouldn't use technology or why they did, and it was kind of very polarized.
Yes.
But I think now that is beginning to change, and there is more, well, is it useful? And if it is useful, then how can it be used? So in terms of AI and dementia, there's a lot of research around that at the moment.
Yeah, that's another fascinating area, isn't it?
Yeah. And there's one that's been developed as well, I can't say it right, a painteraction.
Oh, lovely.
So it's a full body experience for mainly people with autism. So your body becomes the brush. And it's really expressive and sensory. So they're putting a lot of research into that at the moment.
That I would love that.
Yeah, I know.
I really would. Because I do playback theatre on a Monday night, and sometimes we say, like, you know, pretend that your forehead, your nose is the paintbrush, your elbow's the paintbrush, and you're like, you know, moving around. And I've always loved that. So to give a response to the movement, like
I know, that would be fantastic.
I'd love that. I really, really would. Like, you know, at the moment I have maybe 2 or 3 that would like to have an iPad. They've said it to me in the space.
Right.
And I'm finding that quite hard because I love providing, do you know? And part of me is like, well, I don't have one, and I, you know, kind of thing. But would you say, you know, it's not, obviously this is just your opinion. I'm just looking for your opinion now.
Yeah.
But would you say it would be wrong for them to bring their own one? Like, you know, is it very much part of that therapy boundary again, that it's your device in the space?
Yeah.
Do you know, I suppose that's just been on my mind a lot. You know?
That's a really interesting question. Because I suppose if somebody would they bring a sketch pad to show you stuff they've done at home?
Very rarely. Like, some people are like, they don't leave the house without it. Do you know? Which is great, of course. But thinking about it like that, I suppose. Yeah.
And it depends. I think it would depend on the reason they were bringing it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just one of those that has kind of come to me, and I thought I'd ask while I had the opportunity. But I think I knew the answer. It's just, it's one of those things, isn't it? Because I'm so curious about it, you know?
Yeah. And I think it'd be more phones that people bring.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, if they've had apps on their phones that they've been working on something, or they want to show you the photograph. So I think it is more around bringing the phone than a tablet or a laptop.
Yeah. And then, you know, I had mentioned before that earlier to you that, you know, some people are finding that they have their own devices, like a smart device like Alexa or whatever, Siri, and that they're coming alive when they're working online, let's say, and they're in the house and it just picks up on something, or even in the room, sometimes the Siri might just come alive, and it's a hard one to navigate.
It really is, because you know, you can only imagine what they might say, or does that interruption of somebody else been there.
So is it about you know, making the space, like obviously we're human, we're going to forget things that
Yeah.
we left on and stuff like that. But it's about trying our best maybe just to make sure that those things are switched off.
Yeah. And I think just when you start a digital practice, just be mindful of what the pitfalls could be or what can go wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And keeping on this kind of train of thought that I have now, you know, GDPR is a big thing.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
do you find that that's a bit more of paperwork for you, or is it just something that you have on your contract? Or
No, I
how do
just
you?
incorporated it into the contract.
Yeah.
So it's just part of the process.
Yeah. I think that's easier, isn't it? To just have it all there on the same sheet, and away you go.
And just to make the client aware of what could go wrong, or you know, just the things they need their end as well as the things that you need to be responsible for at yours.
I think a lot of people are either they've been wounded by it because of the experience of HSE, and they've had that experience, and maybe they're a little bit more sensitive to it, or just that awareness of like, well, there is a possibility of something, you know. So just bringing it to the table.
If you've taken all the steps you can reasonably, responsibly undertake, then
exactly. Like you had mentioned, like encryptions and passwords and things like that on the folders. So that's a very easy way to kind of stop that.
And it's like even in person, people come into the room if they've forgotten somebody's in there or they don't realize it's in use. So there are many equivalents.
Exactly.
It just seems worse because it's tech-based.
I think, so a lot of people would be really like, oh gosh, like, you know, what's happened? But it is exactly the same, isn't it? It's like you may have the sign on the door, but somebody can just come in. That's it. So I think, you know, there's a lot of possibilities, you know, with animation, with movies, with collage. So it's just how you use it and using different platforms, and the sky's the limit, it seems.
It is, and have lots of fun experimenting. That's half the joy. You know, just as you would any material.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, would you say that your, I suppose, job satisfaction is more now than before? Isn't that great?
It is fantastic.
I can tell, like, from you, you know, that it's, that's really great.
Because I never thought it would be, I suppose it just fast forwarded that digital engagement for creative arts therapists all over the world.
Would you have a digital art therapist role model? Do you know, because I definitely have some role models that I look up to in the industry. Would you have anyone that you really like? Is there anyone? I wonder.
I'm trying to think. There have been, there's like the pioneers of it. So Natalie Carlton, she was one of the first.
Brilliant.
Over in America.
So that's someone to Google.
And Gretchen M, she's fabulous too.
Brilliant. That's excellent.
She has a project going at the minute. She's going to do a digital time capsule that'll be opened in 10 years' time. And if you go onto her site, it gives you the option to take part. So it's 10 things that you would put in the digital time capsule.
Wonderful. Oh, I like that.
And she has those great resources as well about working online. And
brilliant.
Maybe check it out.
I'll put that in the notes then as well. Brilliant. Lots of handy resources there. So I suppose, you know, just to kind of, I know we're coming to the end of our chat, but I wonder, is there anything, you know, that's happening currently for you, like whether it's through Polyphony or just even in your own work, that you're really excited by? You know, is there anything that you'd like to share?
I'm definitely excited by the potential of Polyphony. You know, I know that it has brought to creative arts therapists in Ireland under Maggie and Pamela's stewardship. Because I think the move online has just been incredible.
And just at the right time as well.
Yeah. I know. You must have a pair of crystal balls, the two of them.
I think so. It was magic. Yeah. It was literally the month before, wasn't it? It was like the February 2020. Yeah. And then like within weeks, just mind-boggling.
And that it highlights and showcases the diversity of creative arts practice in Ireland.
Yeah. And this possibility to collaborate with anyone in the world, no matter where you are, no matter where you're listening, you can go on, and if you want to contribute, you can.
Yeah, and in all its forms as well,
Yeah,
be it word or digital, or digital elements added to traditional research, and as we were saying, that backbone of creative arts therapy practice.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
the evidence.
Yeah, and I think so many people shy away from it, but it really helps our work become more professional and evidence-based.
Absolutely.
So any contribution is worth putting forward and getting published.
Because it all supports the move towards statutory recognition as well.
Yeah,
and exactly. I think the more that evidence base is grown, hopefully.
That's it, exactly. And it doesn't need to be huge quantities. It can be quite small and have that lovely quality to it. So it doesn't need to be a vast amount of people involved in it. It can be a small group, like 6 or 8 people that you had over 6 weeks, and you're just finding some findings. It can be just that. So why not put yourself forward, and you're there as well. Yourself and Maggie O'Neill are there to support people. And well, I hope that that we get to link in a little bit more now. And I'm on the editorial board. I haven't felt like I've done anything yet towards it, but I hope that hopefully this year I can contribute a little bit more. And it's a pleasure to be on it, and I really look forward to working with you and the journal as much as I can.
I'm looking forward to that too, Vicky.
I
think the shock's worn off now.
Oh, definitely. And I think Maggie is such a lovely person.
She's brilliant to work with.
Yeah, exactly. So it's been a pleasure chatting with you today, and thank you so much for giving me your time. It's a joy, and I love the work you're doing.
Thank you so much.
It's very inspiring, and I feel like I'm going to look up now a few of those people too, and start pulling some resources together for myself and some training. Why not just jump in? That's what our clients do.
They do.
Yeah, so why not? So thank you so much, and I hope you have a lovely week.
And you, and sun shining.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Vicky.
Take care.
Lovely to talk to you.